Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be discussing how to prepare a certificate of analysis, also known as COA. If peradventure you work in the laboratory or in a quality control unit or in a water treatment plant or in a pharmaceutical and beverage industry or in a chemical production industry, this video will be of great importance to you. By the end of today's video, you will understand what a certificate of analysis is and how to prepare a correct one. First of all, what is a certificate of analysis? A certificate of analysis is a laboratory document that specifies that a product or a sample has been tested and whether it meets regulatory requirements. A certificate of analysis answers three key questions, which are: what was tested, how was it tested, what were the results, and whether they meet regulatory requirements. A certificate of analysis, if well drafted, provides traceability, credibility, and regulatory compliance. Basic sections of a certificate of analysis. A certificate of analysis contains about 5 sections. So the basic sections of a certificate of analysis, in order to fully describe this section well, I want to write it on the white marker board. The sections of a certificate of analysis will have about 5 sections. The first section is the laboratory information. And this particular section is where you have the name of the laboratory, the address of the laboratory, the contact number of the laboratory, and as well whether the lab is accredited to ISO 17025 or not. But most times, because most certificates of analysis are issued on the letterhead of the company, so most times these informations are contained on the letterhead of the company. And if this section is clearly written very well, assuming the name of the laboratory may be Graceland Analytical Laboratory, located in number 4 Igwebike School Road, Awka. And the contact number is 080 and so on and so forth. Then, if the lab is accredited to ISO 17025, the logo of the accreditation body will be fixed here. And if this section is well clearly stated very well, this establishes the authority of the analysis. The second section is the client or sample information. In this particular section, this is a well-detailed section. First of all, the first thing that will appear in this section is either test report or certificate of analysis. Now, after this is established, the next thing that will be stated clearly is the report number. Let's take, for instance, that this sample was received in 2026, in January 2026, and was analyzed and released. So the lab report number can be, if taken as Graceland Analytical Lab, the abbreviation will be GAL. So the report number can be GAL/2026/tests report/0001. So this shows the report number. Now, the next thing that we will have is the date of report. That is the date that the lab issues the certificate of analysis. And the date of report can be January 18, 2026. If we have established that, then the next thing that is important in a certificate of analysis is name of sender or client. Then the address of sender or client. Then the contact number of the client. Now, if we have been able to establish this, then the next thing is that anytime a sample is sent to a lab, the laboratory generates a very unique identity number that is peculiar to that particular sample. So that will be the next thing that will show, the lab ID number. In such a particular lab like Graceland Analytical Lab, the lab ID can be Graceland Analytical Lab / since this sample was received in 2026, it will be 2026/0001. So if we have been able to show the lab ID, then the next thing will be sample description. So in this particular place, the sample is being described. Is the sample a water sample? Is it soil sample? If it is water sample, is it clear? You have to specify that. A lot of other things that is being seen. Everything that is seen will be clearly stated. The container that was used to bring the sample, all those things will have to enter in the sample description. Now, every sample that is sent has a name. Maybe you write it as name of product. Now, the next thing is quantity received. Assuming that the company sent about 5 samples or 10 samples or whatever, that will be actually stated. Then after that, there are a lot of basic informations on the product, like manufacturing dates, batch number, then best before, that is when the products will expire. Then these are all important informations. Then if the product is registered with NAFDAC, then that should be stated, NAFDAC number. Then if it is registered with MANCAP, then you state the MANCAP number. Then most times we're able to understand that most times that the person that sends a sample may not be the person manufacturing the sample. So if it is not so, then it is important that you have to state the name of manufacturer, address of manufacturer, contact number of manufacturer. Now, very, very important to note is the date that that sample was received, date of receipt. Then, if all these things are clearly spelled out, this actually establishes traceability of that sample. Be it from the manufacturer because all the details of the products are well specified, be it of the lab because all the details of the lab are all specified there. So if all this section is being clearly specified, it establishes traceability. The next part of the certificate of analysis is the section that contains the parameters that analyzed, the test method, the result, and the standard that you use to compare the results. So for me to be able to write this clearly, I'll need to clean up some areas of this. So in order to clearly state that, we will have to write parameters, method, measured value, and then because we're in Nigeria, the standard that we normally use is NIS, which is produced by Standard Organization of Nigeria. So assuming that the sample that was brought is water, and then the lab was able to analyze it, let me just take for instance pH, conductivity, and the total dissolved solid. TDS is measured in milligram per liter, and conductivity is measured in microsiemens per centimeter. pH doesn't have units. Most times you specify the temperature at which it was measured. So it is very important that you specify the method that is being used. Assuming that you use EPA 2001 whatever, and then for conductivity the method you use is AOAC 9 whatever, and then for TDS you still use AOAC 911 or whatever, then the method number has to be clearly stated. Then after the analysis, presumably the sample analysis gave a pH result of 5.6, and then the conductivity gave a result of 950, and then the TDS gave a result of 475. And then in this, the standard for drinking water pH is between 6.5 to 8.5. And that of conductivity is 1000 maximum. That of TDS is 500 maximum. The implication is that TDS is not supposed to exceed 500 and conductivity is not supposed to exceed 1000. And the pH of the water must fall between 6.5 to 8.5. After that is established, if this is clearly written very well, it establishes the credibility of the test report. While talking about credibility, the credibility lies in the clearly stating the method that was used. Are these methods standard methods? If the standard methods are followed, then the result is what? Credible. Then if we can be able to establish that, then the next part that will be reported in a certificate of analysis is the comments. The comment is very important because that is the compliance statement. A test report or certificate of analysis without a compliance statement is not complete. Now, if we look at this, in order to establish the compliance value, then we must have to compare the measured value with the standard. If we look at this place, the test report of this sample, we'll be able to find out that the total dissolved solid fall within the acceptable range. And as well, the electrical conductivity fell below the requirements, but only the pH. Because the pH is supposed to fall between 6.5 to 8.5, but the result gotten is 5.6. So you have to state what? The pH is below the regulatory limit. You won't just end it here. As a public analyst, you have to advise your client. Treatment is recommended. Now, in all these things that we have written, because at times these samples are received by people who don't understand certain terminologies. You have seen where I wrote total dissolved solid, I wrote milligram per liter. For conductivity, the unit is microsiemens per centimeter. But the person that sent it may not understand what it is, so you have to clearly make a small note. Note, microsiemens per centimeter is equal to, you write the name in full, what it means, microsiemens per centimeter. Then for the other one, mg per L, which is milligram per liter. With this, we've been able to explain to whoever sent this sample what the units of the parameters are. Then the last part is the authorization and signature. In this authorization and the signature, the lab will have to authenticate the result. And who authenticates the result is the highest personnel in the lab. And most of the times it is the lab director. So what happens here is that you give a name of the lab director, which may be Mr. Emeka Ane. And Mr. Emeka Ane happens to be the laboratory director. So Mr. Emeka Ane will have to sign his signature to authenticate the result. Then, if this section is clearly written, it shows that this test report or certificate of analysis is valid. A certificate of analysis without the authorization is not valid. Now, most of the times, some people will make mistake of altering some statements or comments or things in the certificate of analysis. The person may end up saying, hey, this what I've written is wrong. 950, I'm supposed to have what the lab notebook says is 940. Then they may go and start trying to alter something. Instead of doing that, the best way to handle that in the lab is to issue another report, which is the amendment. And to issue an amended report, there are basic aspects of the report that will change. The first part of the report that will change is the title. The title will now be a Certificate of Analysis Amended. The issuing date will have to change. The issuing date will now bear the date of amendment. But the certificate number, that's the report number, will have to be the same. Then all other details of the sample will have to be the same. But very important that the reason for amendment of that certificate of analysis will be stated clearly why it is the certificate was amended. Thank you so much, my viewers, for listening to our video today. In our next video, please, while we wait for our next video, it is important that you critically look at our video, like, subscribe, and make comments. Thank you so much.